Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, David here, and welcome back to another video. And this one is going to be on a series, a franchise of games that I like quite a bit, and I wanted to start talking about this franchise here on the channel a little more. So what better way to start than a where to start guide or an introduction for beginners to the Dragon Quest franchise. Which game should you start with, which game is the best entry point, and also on which platform or which version of the game should you play first for the best experience possible. I have a lot of viewers here on the channel who are here for the Atlas content, so I'm hoping that you guys give Dragon Quest a chance, because when it comes to turn-based RPGs, you can't get a Persona or an SMT if you don't have a Dragon Quest. So let's get right into it. There's 3 games that I highly recommend that I think are great entry point for the Dragon Quest franchise, and I'm gonna start with the elephant in the room, which is the next big game coming out for the Dragon Quest franchise, Dragon Quest III. Now, in November of 2024, we're gonna see the release of an HD 2D remake by Square Enix Team Asano for Dragon Quest III in HD 2D. Looks great, sounds great, everyone's in agreement for that, but is it a great place to start? Now, Dragon Quest creator Mr. Yuji Hori said in an interview recently that players shouldn't be scared to jump into Dragon Quest for the first time with Dragon Quest III HD 2D. And this got a lot of people talking because, hey, is he obviously just trying to sell his game, or is it really a great entry point? And that's what we're going to try and figure out right now. Now, obviously, if you didn't know, 1, 2, and 3, they're in a trilogy together. This is why Square Enix announced that, hey, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 are also getting the remake treatment set to release in 2025. So should you wait for these games to be out before 3? Well, maybe, but maybe not. So let's try and find out. So he said that it's going to be interesting to see players' reaction when they first play the first trilogy of Dragon Quest in that order. That is very interesting because some fans clearly are in disagreement with this statement, saying that, hey, Dragon Quest III won't hit as hard, especially the ending. It won't hit as hard if you didn't play Dragon Quest 1 and 2. It won't hit as hard. Think about it for a second. So that doesn't mean that you won't understand. It just means that 1 or 2 scenes in particular maybe you won't feel as much emotion if you didn't experience 1 and 2 beforehand. So understandable and a fair thing to mention for sure. That being said, one thing that a lot of people are not necessarily considering is that there is new stuff in that remake. There is new content, there is changes. Are there story changes? Are there added scenes to explain certain events from 1 and 2 in 3 remake? I'm thinking that is a very high probability. One thing's for sure, Dragon Quest III is a game that you can absolutely start with, and I would recommend it for sure. Dragon Quest III in the West is the Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy. Dragon Quest III is FF7 to the Dragon Quest franchise. It is a staple title in the franchise. It is the evolution of Dragon Quest 1 to 3. So if you start off with 3, you're going to understand. You're going to have a good time. You're going to miss the impact potentially, depending on the changes that we have in the remake, if you don't play 1 and 2. But otherwise, it's a great game. It's the best game in the first trilogy. It is complete. You have a team now. You can control multiple party members. It is classic Dragon Quest at its peak, in my opinion, so I recommend playing it. Now, when it comes to platforms, obviously, I think a fair recommendation would be to wait and see what happens with the remake. If you're watching this video at the time of release, clearly, I would suggest waiting if you can to play Dragon Quest III and check out the other suggestions that I have to make here beforehand, because the remake is quite potentially going to be the definitive version of Dragon Quest III. Now, the first trilogy, there's really no perfect way to experience it at the moment. I would probably suggest, if you definitely want to play 3 before the remake comes out, I would suggest trying it out on Super Nintendo directly. Do emulation, PC, you know? It's an easy thing to do, emulation of these games, and they aged really well, they work well. So Dragon Quest III specifically, I think you can absolutely go back to and experience the SNES version of that game. The version that was re-released on modern platforms, sadly, is the mobile ports, and they work fine. it is a fine way to experience Dragon Quest III, but it looks very ugly in my opinion, and I think there's a certain charm that the original has that the remake clearly has as well, that this mobile port to modern platforms doesn't have. So take that as you will. My suggestion is wait for the remake or play the SNES version. I think that is the best thing to do for sure. My next suggestion is also a fan favorite, and that is obviously the classic Dragon Quest VIII. So Dragon Quest VIII released on PlayStation 2 and it was ported to the Nintendo 3DS in modern days. It is a fan favorite. It is a very solid place to start. It's where most fans of the franchise that I know started with Dragon Quest. It's where I started as well. The story pacing is extremely solid. It doesn't drag like other entries like Dragon Quest VII, where sometimes it's a little bit confusing, you're gonna search for stuff. In 8th, it's clear, it's straight to the point, it's a great pure Dragon Quest experience. There's no heavy grinding, and even though it's a PlayStation 2 game, the visuals age super well. It's self-shaded, it looks great even in modern day. And that is no matter if you play on PlayStation 2 or 3DS. The mechanics, the gameplay mechanics of Dragon Quest VIII are super easy to understand, and the story of 7 isn't part of a trilogy. So if you just want to experience a Dragon Quest game, you don't want this long-ass commitment, I want to play one game, I want to see how it is, 8th is a great entry point for you, that's for sure. When it comes to where you should play Dragon Quest VIII, I mean, both versions of the game are high recommendations. If you go back and play the PlayStation 2 version, the original, you're in for a treat. The visuals are a little better than on 3DS due to higher resolution. The best thing about the PS2 version, in my opinion, is the orchestrated soundtrack, which sounds way better than what you have on 3DS. Otherwise, everything else is better on Nintendo 3DS in my opinion. The portability aspect is a big thing for me. That alone makes it the definitive version of the game, again, to me. But other than that, this re-release features a lot of quality of life improvements. There is new side content as well, and it's a very good game. It works well on 3DS, it runs well, and it looks perfectly fine as well. You have stuff like, when it comes to the quality of life improvements, there is stuff like speeding up battles, which for older RPGs, older turn-based RPGs, is a huge feature. So I would certainly recommend checking it out on 3DS. Obviously, if you do emulation, I assume there's some way to make it HD and make the battles go faster, all that good stuff. PC gamers, just drop a comment and tell people about that. Please, I'm sure you will. So Dragon Quest VIII, great place to start and certainly a fan favorite. The final game that is clearly an easy recommendation and probably the best game to start with is none other than the latest and most modern Dragon Quest game, Dragon Quest XI. Most precisely, Dragon Quest XI-S would be the best way to start. Now, fans of the franchise, longtime fans of the franchise will all agree that if you play Dragon Quest XI-S without any prior knowledge of the Dragon Quest franchise, you're gonna miss certain winks, you're gonna miss certain Easter eggs. But regardless of that, you're gonna experience a standalone story that is set apart from other games in the franchise, and not only are you gonna understand everything, but you're gonna enjoy it as well, because the story in 11 is great, the characters are unique, they're well designed, and they're very attaching, so it's a fantastic entry point. I also know of a lot of people who started with Dragon Quest XI, so certainly a great entry point. Unlike Dragon Quest VIII, 11 is very accessible because it's playable on all modern platforms, all current platforms on the market: PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC. Looks good, plays good, easy mechanics to understand, and I like to call Dragon Quest XI a modern classic RPG, a good modern classic RPG. When you play it, it feels like you're playing a Super Nintendo RPG in terms of mechanics and gameplay, but it looks like a modern game, it sounds like a modern game, and it plays like a modern game. It's honestly very solid. Again, the Easter eggs that you're gonna miss, no biggie in my opinion. I certainly wouldn't skip this game for that reason alone. Again, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to platforms, there's really not much to say. No matter where you play Dragon Quest XI's, you're gonna have a good experience. The game looks great, runs great, loading times are minimal. It's a very solid experience from start to finish, no matter where you play it. I'm going to talk about the Switch version because that's where I played the game, and that is the least powerful system that it's on. And even on Nintendo, it took years to develop. It was published by Nintendo. It's a solid port. People in the Nintendo community are in agreement that Dragon Quest XI's is one of the best AAA ports on the platform, and I played over 100 hours of it on Switch. Absolutely amazing. It looks great, it runs great, loading times aren't that bad either. It was the only way to experience Dragon Quest XI with orchestrated music for the longest time. Now you have 11S as well on other platforms, so play it wherever you want to play it. It's a good game. So those are my recommendations for where to start with Dragon Quest. I really debated putting games like 9 in there, which I know is a decent place to start as well. But in my opinion, those are the best place to start. And I would certainly recommend either starting with 3 when it releases in November, or if you can't wait, Dragon Quest XI is a great place, and 8 must not be slept on. So 8 is a great place to start, but it probably should be your second game. So I would start with 3 HD 2D, I would play 8, and then I would go back to 11. That to me is best case scenario if you are asking for my opinion. I appreciate you guys watching so much. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a great week. If you enjoyed the content, a thumbs up helps. Otherwise, I do weekly RPG content on the channel, so please consider subscribing. Bye.